Due to the overwhelming stream of major world events in the headlines recently, a congressional vote that fundamentally harms the entire American education system went under the radar, and I'd like to bring attention to that. It's the 2020s, yet apparently McCarthyism is alive and well. Bill H.R. 5349 is a bill co-sponsored by 33 Republicans exclusively that forces high schools to teach students about the quote-unquote dangers of communism, and it was passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. And you guessed it, our least favorite member of Congress, Brad Schneider, went on board with it. This bill starts off by claiming that communism has led to the death of over 100 million people worldwide, which is effectively useless information when no one can agree on what communism is, what states have actually been communist, and while it is rather straightforward to decide how many people an individual state or institution is killed, the act of measuring those killed by an ideology is completely unsubstantiated and arbitrary at best, in particular when we're talking long lengths of time. Should we consider loyalists who died in the American Revolution victims of republicanism? Should we consider Native Americans killed by the United States victims of democracy? If someone starves to death under our government, should we count them as a victim of that ideology the government claims to abide by? If someone dies overseas from weapons sent by a government, did that government's ideology kill that person? Additionally, let's not even get started on how much more drastic the death count would be if we were to apply the same methods to America and tie that to the capitalist ideology. The fact of the matter is, more people have died to American supplied and made weapons in the last 100 years than any other individual state on Earth. And that's not a moral judgment on anything, on capitalism or anything, regardless of America's ideology. If you were the largest military in the world over that period of time, you're just inevitably going to be the most destructive state when it comes to casualties, regardless of your economic system, your ideology, or your political system. This bill pretends that modern China is communist, which simply isn't true whatsoever. Nobody calls Singapore communist, and yet the Chinese economy is very much modeled after Singapore, which can be more appropriately described as state-run capitalism. While this video focuses on analyzing the factions on a video game in Fallout New Vegas, I highly recommend watching The Ideology of Mr. House, which I'll leave in the description, as it gives a thorough explanation of state-run capitalism, Singapore, and how China copied Singapore's economic model. Additionally, they only give 3 examples of modern victims of communism that should be taught to students. Unsurprisingly, they are all the most stereotypical China war hawk talking points imaginable. Quote, such as the treatment of Uyghurs in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region by the People's Republic of China, and aggression by such regimes against democratic nations and democracy, such as action taken by the People's Republic of China to deter pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong, and the increasingly aggressive posture by the People's Republic of China toward Taiwan, a democratic friend of the United States. End quote. Regardless of your disposition on each of these topics, it's obvious what they're trying to do here by exclusively focusing on China. Again, not only does China not fit a reasonable definition of a communist state in the modern era, but even by the definition of the funders of this bill, the victims of the Communism Memorial Foundation, there are several other states that they define as communist whose questions of human rights violations go completely unmentioned here. Speaking of who funds this bill was pushed and created by the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, which is a completely bogus conservative institution funded by one of the Koch brothers amongst a plethora of other far-right donors. Not only did they use their money to force a vote on this in the House, they are directly empowered to teach your child whatever they want them to learn. The group has over $18 million in assets, and of course, donations to the organization are tax deductible. So the billionaire class gets to tell your child what to believe instead of real researchers and real professionals, and they get to receive a tax break for it. It's a beyond dystopian situation. Since as far back as when I was in elementary school, I can remember reading headlines about how America's students were falling behind their international peers. This bill only makes that worse. Not only does it explicitly teach misinformation, as I have shown, but it wastes the time of both our students and our teachers in a time when it is necessary for us to catch up with other nations rather than fall further behind. Now, this may be considered a radical idea by some, but personally, I think our curriculum should be set by actual educators and experts, not the rich in Congress.